Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. As part of the design team over at the Counterfeit Kit challenge, it is our first challenge of the month to talk about ordinary moments. Since that is my normal style of scrapbooking, what I realized I want to share with you today through this layout is a couple of tips for stamping on your layouts, and then I have an idea for using a QR code on your layout. And if you want to know what that is all about, let's go ahead and dive in. All right, here is my photo of my ordinary moment, which is sitting on my back porch watching the bees in my garden. I have a little bee house, and this is only the second year they've moved in, so that's pretty exciting. And I have this QR code printed on my photos as well. Now, I've never done this. I've totally seen other people do it. I've seen tutorials on how to do it, but I've never done it. So I am going to have that going on today. And I am using my Counterfeit Kit with this grid paper that I created, and it kind of mimics the little tube grid that the bees live in, so that's why I'm using that one. Now, as I sort through these things, going back to that QR code links up to a video I took of the bees, and I've posted it to my personal YouTube account, which really doesn't have much there. And that QR code will link to that video, and anytime in the future someone scans that code, they can see the video of these bees. And that is a pretty fun, interactive way to add stuff to your layouts with the technology that we have these days. And I will leave a link to the QR code generator that I use to create that. There's a lot of them out there. It's all pretty free. All you need is a place to host your video. So I just use my personal Google account for this one. And then you can use a QR code generator, and it will give you a JPEG file of that QR code, and I just added that to my photos when I was printing my photos. So that is all about the QR codes, and if you have any more questions on that, it is pretty straightforward. And like I said, I will leave you a link to the one that I used, but there's lots of them out there. If you do any kind of, Google search or whatever, you can find places to use. All right, I have got my layout going on, and it's a pretty straightforward layout. We will get to a couple of those stamping tips after I get some of these bits and pieces going together. I am wanting to ink my edges to help everything stand apart from each other, and I got a little overzealous with my inking and made a smudge, and that happens to me all the time. So I just made that purposeful on the rest of the inking, and that makes it look like I did it on purpose. So, that's how I roll with that. I am adding just a little bit more definition to this layout with some foliage print pattern papers there and making everything even and matched. I did trim down that kind of center panel that's going to hold just about all of my layout because I wanted more of the grid to show around, and I was getting covering up a lot of it with this. All right, I have this Concord and 9th die set that has this big yay word on it, and not only does it cut out the letters yay, but it cuts out this shadow layer of yay. And I knew I wanted to pop this up on the backer. It's got two layers to the shadow, I guess. There's like the solid backer shadow layer, and then there's these pieces, which is like shadows to the letter to give them depth and dimension. And you can die cut that out of like a black cardstock or a gray cardstock to give them an actual shadow look, but I'm just going to leave it all from the same cardstock. I will pop up the actual letters so it gives a physical depth and dimension. So that's going to be just the first part of my title. I really like to mix up my titles with different words and fonts and textures and things like that. So I'm going to mix that die cutting with some stamping. So here's where we're going to start talking about stamping tips. If you're nervous about stamping on your layouts because you kind of got a one chance at it, there are stamping tools for card makers. There is a large size Misty stamping tool for scrapbookers, but it's pretty expensive. So let's talk about a couple of tips if you don't have that tool, can't afford that tool. One of the tips is for any stamp that is hard to see. I mean, clear stamps you're supposed to see through, is supposed to make them easier to position, yet sometimes they're really hard to see, especially smaller text like this stamp here. So one thing I like to do with these is stain them with a permanent ink. So I'm stamping it on a StazOn ink. You could use an alcohol marker or an alcohol ink, but you can see those letters now once they have that permanent ink on them. And because that ink is permanent, it won't transfer when you use other colors with it. So I'm going to set that aside to dry because it does take a little bit of time for that permanentness to set in. And I'm going to work on another part of this stamping, which is to create the word you. This is a stamp set from Elle Studio, and it was one that I had gotten as part of a class kit. I think it's still available. If it is, I'll link you up to that. The die cut was from Concord and Ninth, and I know that one is still available. So I will link you up to these products below if you like them and would like to access them. If you do shop using my links for anything you buy, I do earn a very small commission. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but that is a great way to say thank you to me to keep this content coming to you, because as you know, this hobby, it definitely takes some money to go with. Okay, here is the next stamping tip I would like to talk about. This word you has two parts to it. It has the inner part and an outline part. Now with the outline part, I wanted to try that first tip, which was to go ahead and stain it with my StazOn ink. And I've already done that, set it aside to dry, and I brought it back on screen to try and line it up. And because I'm lining it up over a tone-on-tone previous stamping, it is still pretty hard to see. So I'm giving it a go here, and in the end, I'm going to decide that I'm just not feeling confident that I can get my stamp to line up where I want it to be. So I'm going to grab this old school tool. This existed before any stamp platform positioners existed, and this is called a Stamp-O-Majig. It came under different brands. Stampin' Up! Had one, which is mine, but the original manufacturer, I think that was EK Success, had one. You can find these on eBay, and while this particular Stamp-O-Majig doesn't exist anymore, there is a version that does exist today. It is by Wendi Vecchi and Ranger, and it's just called the Stamp Positioner tool. I'll pop that up here on the screen for you. But basically what you're going to do is line up a plastic sheet on your project. You're going to put it into the corner of your stamp positioner. You're going to stamp on that plastic sheet, and this is reusable, so you can wash it off and wipe it down and reuse it. You can position that plastic sheet exactly where you want it on your project. Put the Stamp-O-Majig corner back up to your sheet, and then grab your stamp and line it up with that corner, and then go ahead and ink. You don't want to move that corner tool at all, because if you do, that will misalign things. So it can be a little sensitive if you bump it, but this is the best, most inexpensive stamp positioning tool that we have for scrapbookers. It's like under $15, whereas the Misty 12x12 stamping tool is about $100. All right, you saw that close up there where I already had my small word stamped. I did skip that step a bit, so let's backtrack a little bit. With that small word stamp having the black stain to it, I can now easily see where my letters are going to line up, and I can just freehand stamp that and feel confident that it's going to work out okay. So there is my completed title. It says, "Yay, you brighten my day." I did die cut more of these words from that same Yay die set by Concord and Ninth that say amazing, amazing, amazing. And I thought I wanted to just put those down there because I didn't think I was going to do a lot of journaling on this. And as I'm starting to put some embellishing pieces on there, my mind is thinking that maybe I think I do want to say a few more things. And so I don't think I'm going to have room for those amazing words. I'm going to go ahead and set those off to the side where I think about some other embellishing. And really, since I wanted to focus on the stamping technique and the QR code idea, I'm just going to kind of go through all of this embellishing rather quickly. I've included fibers in my kit this month, which I've been wanting to use more and more, so I was sure to get some of those on there just by wrapping a few elements, including that QR code printout, and because it's on photo paper, it's thick enough to be able to wrap the twine around it. I'm going to build up embellishment clusters like I usually do. I found a little tiny journaling card from my Tracy Reed printable supplies to do my journaling on. And so I'll add that in there instead of the word amazing. Although I think I do come back and glue one tone on tone amazing word below my journaling so that I can still get one of those used on there. And because it's tone on tone, it doesn't detract as much from the other elements. So that will go on there. And now I'm just kind of finishing up with a few sprinklings of a couple of puffy heart enamel dots. And then I have some wood veneer that I can sprinkle with instead of, like other enamel dots or sequins or whatnot that I usually do. Oh yes, this is where I'm putting that word amazing back on there. So as you can tell, it'll be pretty subtle, but I like having it on there. I do want to try and put the other ones on there, but I make myself stop because it's just, there is a point where it gets to be too much. And I have a hard time stopping sometimes. So made myself stop, called it good, and here are the close-ups of that finished layout. I hope you will go over to the Counterfeit Kit Challenge group and see what our other team members as well as our other community members are sharing on this challenge. And I should be back with you next week for more crafty videos. So until then, I hope you have an artful day.